All right, joined by Gloucester Police Chief Ed Conley to tell us what the entire force is up to these days. How are you, Chief? Thanks for spending some time with us.
Good afternoon. Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Certainly, this is a first for me doing an interview like this.
Yeah.
I should tell you, not my first time on Zoom. I've come, like a lot of Americans, I've come very familiar with this video conferencing platform.
Yeah.
You're talking to the mayor and other city partners on Zoom?
Correct. Actually, we have our senior management meeting usually every other week on Zoom, and certainly we've had a number of conference calls almost daily, different briefings.
Right.
Sure.
Well, at least we can all communicate like this, right? It's
correct. Right.
Yeah.
It's not just the kids anymore.
Well, so Chief, let me ask you, what have been your immediate challenges since the pandemic outbreak?
So just locally here within the department, certainly my concern is, the impact on the health and wellness of my staff. And that's not to prioritize the police department over, citizens within the city of Gloucester. It's just that if we had an outbreak here in the department, it could be devastating overnight in terms of putting people out on quarantine, certainly people potentially needing medical attention. And, and that impact on the police department would have a subsequent impact on our ability to deliver services to the community. So, right away we started putting into place plans. I want to say probably around the first or second week of March, we immediately began identifying employees who could work remotely. And we started purchasing laptops and other equipment that was going to be needed to do that. Many of them already had laptops, and we initiated a remote working policy.
And what precautions are the officers who are on duty and interacting with folks every day, what are they taking?
So Lieutenant Dave Quinn is what we call designated infectious control officer, and his job is to make sure that every officer has the protective equipment that they need to perform their duties. And so, officers have a wide array of protective equipment in their cruisers, everything from N95 masks and goggles and Tyvek suits, certainly gloves that they typically have. And we have an entire policy about when they wear certain protective equipment. But basically, our posture has been just maintaining a social distance whenever possible. So some of the things that we've done that are different, but for us, but certainly becoming best practices across the country, is we have many of these sort of lower grade kind of calls we get. For example, a malicious destruction or a past fraud or even a past larceny where there may not be any evidence to be collected. We're taking those reports via the telephone. If an officer does have to report to your home to take additional information, we're typically asking residents to step outside and speak with the officer out in the open air.
Tell us about the community impact unit that was about to get set up and established. What is its purpose? We missed its grand opening. Can you give us some information on that?
Certainly. So, the community impact, well, I should start by saying that the Gloucester Police Department has a long history of trying to engage all of our partners here in the community around providing services to people that are in recovery. A lot of that initially came out of what was called the Angel Program. And that was sort of the first stab at attacking opioid addiction and the deaths that were associated with fentanyl. And now what we've done is sort of expanded that, because that program was very focused on opioid addiction and trying to stem the death rate. Well, we have a good sense of how to do that now, particularly around Narcan and training. But what we find, and certainly is probably intuitive to a lot of people, particularly families who have members or themselves have suffered from this, is that opioid addiction isn't mutually exclusive from mental health problems or homelessness. And so what we're trying to do with the Community Impact Unit, particularly with Tito Rodriguez, is to meet people where they're at, getting an assessment for what's their problems they're trying to solve or need help dealing with, and then having a good sense of what's available here in our community that can be brought to bear on those problems to help people, and then to do that over the long term. And so his title is called Community Navigator, and that's exactly what he does. He grabs somebody where they're at and he helps navigate them through the things that they need to be, or I should say, have the best chance of being successful in their recovery. And Lieutenant Nicastro oversees that aspect of it, but also over time, we hope to scale this unit and have additional officers assigned to it, and to include what he now oversees also is the SROs. And so in the summertime, our SROs are typically out of schools and back on the street, and we want to be able to leverage their abilities to build relationships by putting them out into the community on different events and different initiatives that we'll have. But what was lacking in the initial Angel program was specific structure within the police department to make sure that work gets done and hold people accountable for that work being done. And what the Community Impact Unit does is it creates that structure for all time to make sure that work is getting done. And not only that, but we're collecting the data and taking a look at what we're doing. Is it working? Do we need to adjust? And the only way you can do that is by having a specific formal structure.
Well, have you seen those operations be severely impacted by the COVID-19 emergency? I mean, that population is even more compromised, I would imagine. And are your officers needing to address the more complicated levels there?
Well, certainly, like all of our operations, it has shifted in how we approach it. They're still doing their work. Tito is still reaching out to the people he engages with, this now by phone more so. If he does meet with them, they meet with some social distance. They apply all those same standards that the rest of us are applying to our safety. Lieutenant Nicastro is checking in on helping with the Grace Center. They just had a big move from their shelters over to the YMCA. So they're still doing the work, just like all of us are still doing our work, except we're doing it using different other mediums that are available to us to keep everybody safe.
Right. It sounds like it's been a lot of wheels to get organized in a short period of time, though. Everyone having to adjust to all this, right?
It certainly is. In fact, I understand from Tito that a lot of the recovery meetings have gone to this platform, that they're doing conference calls or video conferencing, and to make sure that the people who are in recovery who need that interaction are still getting it as best we can.
So Chief Conley, have you been, what's your reaction to the public's response to being sort of persuaded to stay home during this time? Are you pleased with the response?
For the most part, I am. I mean, I've seen, certainly just driving into work, you see, like everybody who has to drive in, I'm sure people have noticed there's no traffic. I mean, there's nobody on the highways. So there's that. We have in Gloucester made a conscious choice to keep our open spaces open, because we're not in a shelter in place situation yet in Massachusetts. I have no information that we will be, but as of right now, the idea of staying at home doesn't preclude somebody from stepping outside and going for a walk, as long as they, are mindful of the social distancing. And this could become a problem on really nice days at our beaches. One of the reasons why, and I know this is a controversial decision, we continue to reevaluate it, that we've kept the parking lots closed in Gloucester at the beaches, is to use that almost as a built-in feature to force people to socially distance. If we open up the parking lots at Good Harbor Beach or Windershik Beach, there's just no way to do that. People are going to park. They're just, human nature is they're going to find parking, and people are going to, when it's an open spot, they're going to take it, and they're going to get out and hope for the best. And that's just not what we want. By doing this, we encourage people to walk to the beaches, which results in people spreading out when they get to the beach, take a bicycle to the beach. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as they're exercising social distance. We have had a couple of instances, more so down by Windershik, where one of the nice days a couple of weeks ago, I think people were still sort of not totally grasping the seriousness of the outbreak and the pandemic, but we had a lot of vehicles parked down there, and they were parked in such a way that would have limited and restricted emergency vehicle access to the beach. So we did have to go down there and make an always unpopular decision of tagging the vehicles that were there that were parked illegally, and we had to tow a few because they were specifically obstructing access. And I think that was, people get upset when that happens, and they, a lot of the feedback I received from the public was this the right time to be tagging vehicles? Well, my response to that is, well, you're putting my officers not only are you putting my officers at unnecessary risk to have to go down there, you're putting the public at unnecessary risk by blocking and obstructing this passageway, and you're diverting my resources to an area where I really would rather they weren't spending their time doing that sort of thing. And to be honest with you, most police officers I know don't want to be writing parking tickets for people. They don't want, especially at a time like this. But you know what? Parking tickets are, at the end of the day, they're effective ways of deterring people from going back there. So hopefully that doesn't happen anymore. And I'm sure it won't.
Are there any other kinds of sort of organic measures such as closing the parking lots, that you're making in order to support the stay-at-home advisory?
So, right now we're not in a position of enforcing, we're not jumping out of cruises and running up to people who, may be too close together, or jumping out with the tape measurer and measuring people. I mean, we don't know. It'd be kind of difficult to enforce if you think just about like people walking on the boulevard. If you saw two people walking shoulder to shoulder on the boulevard and a police officer jumped out and said, hey, you're 6 feet. And it's like, well, this is my wife. I'm going to go home and, we're going to go to bed together. So, does it really make a lot of sense for me to be, it's difficult to enforce. I think, listening to the news reports this morning, listening to the meme updates this morning, I think everybody knows that the next month is going to be critical, right? And we could see changes happening quickly. We're prepared to react to those changes in a way that's, considerate of the public, in a way that the public sees us as a partner in their safety, not as just a big enforcement arm of all of this. And we have plans in place for that.
And there have been a few stories I've seen in the Gloucester Times and some other papers that crime is down. Do you want to comment on that?
Well, it is, and I'm going to knock on some wood right here. So, our calls on this is not unique to Gloucester or Cape Ann. This is what we're hearing in New York and Detroit and some of the major cities. I think there's a psychological impact, and certainly just my layman's point of view, on people have a fear that's a little different when it comes to a virus, right? That we're all reacting in such a way to a virus. And after September 11th, many of us remember there was that same sort of momentary feeling of uncertainty, but we understood what happened within a brief period of time. We understood what it meant, and we had responses and defenses ready to go. This is different, and I don't think we have a whole lot to sort of fall back on in our personal experience to understand how to feel. So I think there is some sort of societal reaction happening here that people are. I drive into work and people are driving so slow. I mean, they're driving slow. I was telling my wife yesterday. I said, I don't understand what's going on. People are driving so slow. I never see this. And just as in terms of call volume, our call volume in the month of March compared to March last year is down 30%. Just in call volume. So there's certainly something going on, and I just think what I want to think, because I'm optimistic and at my core, is that people are stepping up and they understand this is something that we all have to get through together if we want to be successful.
Well, one thing I've noticed, Chief, is even during this tough time has been the outpouring of support and encouragement from citizens. I've noticed this on the department's social media outlets, with the fire department as well, Addison Gilbert. Restaurants are donating food, people are delivering supplies. Do you want to talk about that just for a second?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to talk about that. I mean, it's, Cape Ann, I know I've been a police chief in 2 other places. I was a police officer in Chelsea for many years. In all those communities, I have experienced the citizens, stepping forward and supporting police officers, particularly and firefighters and first responders, particularly when things like this are happening, or even during a, civil unrest or a large fire. Something's different here on Cape Ann. It is, and maybe it is that island mentality that, I've heard about and certainly experienced over the last year, that people come together. Tito Rodriguez would tell you, because he said it many times before, that he thinks it comes from the fishing culture, being an old port community where people had to look out for each other, that just gets passed down. That just becomes, woven into the culture. So we have seen that. I mean, we've just, if I walk down to my break room, there's food down there. There's plenty of soft drinks and coffee. from all these different restaurants within the city that are brought forward. So that certainly is not only important to certainly the ability to access food and drink, but for the morale of the police officers to know that the whole community is behind them here is important to me. It definitely has an impact. And I should just say that we have an entire process about how we accept the food and how it gets into the police department and sanitize, and certainly there's a whole thing that we have to do with that, but it's been great.
All have to do that thing, actually, when things come to our homes. Yeah.
Well, we hope to follow up with you as the saga sort of continues here too. We really appreciate your time and everything the force is doing for the city of Gloucester. So be safe, be well, and we'll have to catch up soon.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity to address everybody on this medium, and I'm certainly available to do it in the future.
Great. We'd love to talk again. Thanks for all you do.
Take care. Have a good day.